listeners, we just wanted to let you all know that the book that we'll be reviewing does have some very heavy content in it. So we wanted to give you all a trigger warning. If you have more questions about what that all entails, please reach out, or you can look on Grady Hendrix' website.
Hey guys, welcome to Hex and Chill. This is Kay, Shay, and Lou, and today we're going to do a book review on Grady Hendrix' Witchcraft for Wayward Girls.
We're so excited.
It was such a good book.
Yes, it was.
Shay's going to real quick start us off from a quote from the book.
Magic works as it works, and it follows the longer road. A spell may take a lifetime to show results, but have faith. Believe in what you have done, because anything executed with all your will and craft is something that cannot go wrong. You may not recognize the spell as it shapes you. Its workings may be subtle and unfold over years. But trust in yourself and trust in your coven. The spell you need may not be the spell you cast, but the workings of a witch are never in vain.
All right, witchlings, we have opened our circle. So if you would like to join us in opening your own circle, we would love that. You can cast that protective boundary around you. And here we go.
Funny story. Yesterday, we actually recorded this whole podcast. And we did an hour of talking with each other.
Over an hour. It was
over
like
an hour. And
30
we all
minutes.
were like, I mean, let's just go with it. It's fine.
It's
it was
gonna be
good.
fine.
We all kind of felt weird about it. And then today we went to go edit it and it was not there. We had accidentally created a loop of us saying something silly and it just looped for the next hour and 25 minutes.
Yeah. Yep. It was.
We tried to recover it. We're like in this panic, like, oh no, like we did all this work. And then we all collectively were like, actually, we didn't really like that recording.
Perhaps we could try one more time. So
Yeah.
we're
And
going
it
to do
worked
that.
out.
So we're excited to talk about it again, maybe with a little bit more clarity. And talking through the book yesterday allowed us to now kind of really know what we want to talk about in this session.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I don't know if you guys know this, but there's a lot of information in a book. Like a lot. Like way more than you would like just like a movie or a TV show.
Well, how long is this book? How many pages?
It's like 400 pages. 500 pages.
And it's also
482.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's important to note that if you haven't read this book and you're listening to this podcast, you can totally listen to the summary, but then you should probably stop. But also, we want you to read it because there are so many details that we're not able to talk about in this podcast.
I think that was the problem with our first one, is that we try to cover the book like we do a movie review, and we're like halfway through panicking because it's going to be
This is a very long summary, guys.
like nobody's going to listen to this. So I think Shay is going to start us off with reading a quick summary of the book.
All right, so Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix is a haunting and gripping tale of power, oppression, and the dark forces that lurk beneath the surface of a society that seeks to control women. The story takes place in the summer of 1970 when 15-year-old Fern is sent to Wellwood House, a home for unwed mothers in St. Augustine, Florida. Hidden away from the world, these girls are expected to give birth in secret and then return to their lives as if nothing ever happened. Under the strict and watchful eye of Miss Wellwood, Fern and the other girls live in silence, stripped of their identities, their choices, and their futures. But everything changes when Fern meets a mysterious librarian who gives her an old book on witchcraft. Suddenly, she and the other girls discover a new kind of power, one that belongs to them and no one else. As they begin to explore spells, rituals, and the magic that has been denied to them, they start to realize that power always comes at a cost. And in a place built on secrecy and control, the line between magic and survival begins to blur. Dark, feminist, and deeply unsettling, Witchcraft for Wayward Girls is a story about the hidden history of women who refuse to be silenced, the magic that has always lived in the hands of the oppressed, and what happens when you finally take back what was stolen from you. I just love that we have a little bit of a theme going on of taking back your power.
Oh, yeah.
That's all I have to say about that.
No, I totally agree. The book was very powerful for all three of us in different ways, I think. As a mother of three, it really hit differently for me with the scenes that the girls went through during birth, because they knew nothing about birth. It's very well written that these girls are completely in the dark about what birth is, what babies are, even what sex is. Like, they don't even know probably how they got pregnant. And with even one of the girls is denying the whole time that she is pregnant. And so when these girls, there are 4 scenes, 3 of them are girls from the house that give birth. They're very traumatic. They're these very scary moments where they are shoved into closets at the hospital or given birth in a home naturally or over a toilet trying to give birth, not knowing that she's giving birth. And they're just these moments that like hit differently and really well of the terror of birth, because it is scary.
Well,
and beautiful,
yeah.
but it is hard.
Well, and what's so scary about it in this book, in this situation, is every time the girls tried to ask, what is giving birth? What does it look like? They are just told, you don't need to worry about it. It's not painful. You go, it's like a trip downtown. You go to sleep and then you wake up and your baby's not there anymore. And that's it. That's all they're told. And I haven't had a baby and I know about how birth happens and all of that. And it still terrifies me. I can't imagine being a 15-year-old girl going through that.
Yeah, definitely. The pain that you have during birth, which Grady Hendrix is a man, and he did this beautifully and respectfully, and even in the forward was like, yo, I'm a man. You're probably wondering why I'm writing this book, but I just think he did it really well. And there was never a point that I was like, a man is writing this, which is really talented.
Yeah, absolutely.
And refreshing reading a male author that's like that.
I want to go back to what you were talking about, like with birth stories. We're going to talk a little bit about each of the main characters of this book. So we start off with Fern, who is our main protagonist. She is a 15-year-old girl who is being driven all the way to St. Augustine, Florida from her home in Alabama by her dad. And when she gets there, she meets a bunch of different characters. The first one that she meets is Miss Rose, who is this quintessential like 70s icon. She is a hippie. She's like, screw the man. Like, she's on strike from doing all of the chores that Miss Wellwood, who is the owner of the home that she's going to, assigns all of the girls. And so we get this moment with Rose where she is very much opposed to whatever is happening to her. And in this whole aspect of going and privately having your baby, she is very much the character that's like, absolutely not, I'm keeping my baby. And then we meet Fern's second roommate, who is Holly, who is
love Holly.
Yes. She, at first, we have no idea how to feel about Holly. She's mute. She doesn't brush her hair. If anyone tries to brush her hair, she lunges at them. She'll try to bite them.
The definition of feral child is Holly. Like, when
Literally.
you think about that crazy girl with the knots in her hair and acting like an animal, like she at church would run up and down the aisle howling. Like, she is that character.
Yes. And Fern specifically talks about how Holly must be older, but she looks like she couldn't be older than 11 years old. But we find out later on that Holly is actually 14.
She's the youngest in the house.
Yep. And then a little later on, probably about a quarter of the way into the book, we meet Zinnia, who is an African-American mother who has been driven by her mother in the middle of the night to come stay at this house. She is very much the voice of reason. She's very much like, okay, what are we doing, guys? This doesn't make any sense. Like, I'm just here. I need to get through this because me and my baby daddy, or they call them PFs in the book, which I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means, because she knows that her PF is waiting for her on the other side of this journey and that they're supposed to end up together. Now, there's a ton of other girls in the house. They're all named specifically flower names because Miss Wellwood, as I've mentioned, the owner of the Wellwood house, renames all of these girls to flower names as to protect their identities, to keep them secret, so that nothing gets out about them actually coming and having a baby here.
I think it's really important to note that from the beginning of the book, we only know Fern's first and last name of the girls that are in the house. And then at the very end of the book is when we learn one of the other characters' first and last name. And when I was reading it, I first just kept thinking of Fern as Neva, and then probably 2 chapters in, she was just Fern now, and it felt like 2 different people almost, because you don't get to be who you actually are in the house.
The importance of that is it strips the girls of their identity and who they are and the lives that they want to get back to. It's this moment where they're like, you are no longer this person. For the months that you're in this house, you are now Fern. And they even give her a different place to say where she's lived. They tell her she can't talk about her family or the boy who got her pregnant. It's very, I don't know, demoralizing.
Yeah, because identities, names are powerful. Who you are is powerful.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. I also wanted to throw in that PF stands for potential father.
Oh, nice.
Oh,
and
there we go.
It's such a dig.
They can't prove it.
Or I know it's such a dig. And another way, it just.
They're like, yeah, you think that this boy is your potential father, but we don't know you, hussy. You know, like they are.
We have to bleep that out.
Hussy?
No, I'm just kidding.
But from the beginning, it is the girls. They are put in their place. And they must stay there because they are sinful. They have brought down their family and themselves by choosing this action. And Miss Wellwood makes it very well known that this is a religious home. We're going to save you from your sins and then send you back to your lives, rebirthed and away from the sin that you've chosen, so you can have a family and a life after this. And Miss Wellwood is very much saying, like, she is the hero here.
Yes. And the thing that it's so sickening. So all of the girls are named after flowers because they are in Miss Wellwood's garden. And when you're looking at it, it's almost like, oh, she's trying to create this beautiful thing. She's tending to her garden. She's taking care of these girls, because that's what she's deluded herself into thinking. Mm-hmm. And it's just the complete opposite. It's all of the control.
I love the word deluded because we do find out later that Miss Wellwood also, as a teenager, gave birth in this home because her father ran it. And instead of taking this moment and being like wanting to help girls like this in a different way, she takes it as, this experience saved me and I want to do this for other girls because my life would be awful if I didn't live in this house with my father and get rid of my baby. Her father is like a god in the house. There are portraits of him everywhere. The house almost feels like Mr. Wellwood. Like he is the living, breathing house. You feel it throughout the whole novel. And during the end, something happens that's really groundbreaking. And I will hit that at the very end about the house.
I also, this just hit me. So Miss Wellwood was a wayward girl. She went one way and it started running the house, is treating these girls as if this is so shameful and making them atone for their sins and doing all of this. And we have Fern, who went through the same experience that Miss Wellwood went through. And instead of going the way of being deluded and owning that, oh, I am such a messed up, sinful person, instead Fern becomes a doula. And she is there helping women through one of the hardest part of their life, or the most painful, all of this. And she's taking the experience that she had and turning it into something beautiful and helpful instead of making the situation worse.
Because we find out Fern's birth story is pretty traumatic and she's just left alone. And she takes that, exactly what Lou said, and is like, I'm going to stand for women and how their birth story is going to go. I'm going to make sure it happens. And that's what a beautiful thing about a doula is when they're in your room helping you have your baby. They're in your corner to be like, no, she wants it this way.
They're your advocate.
Yeah. Because sometimes, there are these times when doctors and stuff try to change and nurses try to make whatever, not easier, but just change your birth story. And a lot of times the doula is there to be like, no, man, like, this is what she wants. Are you sure you want this? Okay, she still wants this. Because you're in so much pain, you can't talk. Like, no one's there, like your husband or your partner or your doula is person you want in your corner to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, that was a tangent, but I think it's important.
I loved it.
I wanted to just play devil's advocate really fast, mostly because you said that Fern and Miss Wellwood essentially go through a similar experience. And yes, Miss Wellwood chose a different path. She became successful. She runs Wellwood House. Fern, on the other hand, is a doula who is bringing life into the world and like helping mothers and stay with their mothers. Again, playing devil's advocate, they could have a very similar journey because Miss Wellwood's practice gave Fern success. She was able to go to college. She was able to finish school. She has a great job. She gets to also fulfill what her deepest desire was to help Holly or help other women. In a sense, could they be the same?
I see what you're saying, because the reality is that some women also want to give birth and then not keep the child. And that is a choice that they're allowed to make. That is what we're all about, body autonomy and women's right to do whatever they want. Some of the girls in the house do want to get rid of their baby, and not out of shame or someone forcing them to do, because we see that in the story. Like Rose is forced to give away her baby. Fern is forced to give away her baby even though she wants it. And that's like disgusting to me. But some of the girls are like, no, I want to come to this house. I want to have this baby and I want to go back to my own life because I just can't do this. I'm too young. I don't want to do this. I want to have the baby and leave. And so for Miss Wellwood, that probably was her choice, and she did find what she wanted. Like everything that's promised to the girls, she achieved, is what you're saying. But at the same time, I think what rubs me the wrong way is that as how she comes back and begins to help these girls, but it becomes more twisted. Like it's not like, I'm going to give you the life I had. There's a point when a character named Hagar looks at her and says, you know, that little girl's going back to her abuser. And at this point, Miss Wellwood has like gone so far from helping to more just like creating perfect girls that she's forgotten about that herself as a little girl in that moment.
Yeah. And
I think that was a really cool moment.
Yeah. I want to pull from what you said and saying like some of the girls wanted to have their baby adopted and everything. But do they really? Because but they're not given a choice, because they're told, oh, your life is going to be really hard if you have this baby.
True.
There's just so much shame around it. And it would just be interesting what it would be like if in the world that they were in, if having a baby wasn't looked at the most sinful thing out of marriage.
Yeah.
I think also what I'm thinking too is that Miss Wellwood and Fern are the same in that they are both products of the system.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Maybe it's not that Miss Wellwood is, I mean, I think she is trying to help, but it's because she only knows how to help in the way that she experienced, right?
Absolutely.
And I feel like the same kind of goes for Fern sometimes, because oftentimes throughout her whole inner dialogue throughout the book, she's like, I just want to go back home. I just want to get the lead in the school play. I just want to finish high school. I just want to do, and then have a family on my own time, which, you know, she obviously struggles with this. Again, this is all she knows because this is what the systems continue to tell her that she's supposed to want.
The system, as a woman in that time period, as a woman now, you sometimes have to play the system in order to survive. If Fern had her baby, or if Miss Wellwood kept her baby, her dad would not let her stay in that house. She would be destitute. She might be homeless. She might lose her baby. You know, there's so many, but she had no choice. And I think that's the underlining theme that was the most impactful, the most, just that underlying horror of you don't have another option.
Which ties into a podcast we're doing about the Salem witch trials, because I feel like that was a case too. Like why the women turned and named other names or said, yes, I'm a witch, even if they weren't a witch, is because they knew if they confessed, they had no option but to confess, or they were hung. So it's this desperation, which I think Grady Hendrix does an amazing job of you not knowing who the villain is. At first, you hate Miss Wellwood, and then she goes through this traumatic thing. The girls curse her, which we'll get into a little bit more in depth. And she ends up like having this traumatic moment of hers where she gets pregnant really, really fast and then delivers a baby, but it's eels. And so you're sitting there listening to her inner dialogue as it's happening. You're like, do we hate Miss Wellwood? Like, this is... Is she just lost? Is she just trying to do her best? And in that moment that you look back and you're like, but I was so blind to all the girls who actually needed me.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just trying to help in the best way I can, like Shay said. But then she, like, and Hagar at the end looks at her and says, because Hagar is like almost her best friend, I feel. And Hagar
she's probably the closest person to
and
her.
Hagar looks on her
Maybe
and says,
Mrs. Deckel.
Yeah, Miss Deckel. Side note, Hagar is a African-American lady that works in the house. She's the cook. Just so we know who she is. So she's the help in the house with her sister Miriam. They're just these two
stellar ladies.
They're these awesome characters, and Hagar's is like that really like on the nose bluntness, like I don't want to talk to you right now, I gotta cook. She makes all the food for all the girls in the house, and they're all on restriction, and so none of them can have salt, and so they all essentially blame her for the flavorness of her she's like,
food.
you don't want to eat, then don't eat, like that kind of character.
But like when in reality we actually know she can cook and that she's great, but she has to do it like, you know,
but anyway,
Miss Wellwood and the doctor said.
Yeah, that's Hagar. Just you have a little glimpse of her, but Hagar looks at her and is like, do you know what you're doing? And if you do, then I quit. I mean, that's what I mean. Hagar was like, drop the mic. And it made Miss Wellwood angry, and she like storms off because she probably at that moment was like, maybe she sees that she's a little lost.
Yeah. And that's, first of all, I love this conversation.
Yeah, that's great.
I also, it's really pulling me back to Christianity, because I feel like that moment when Hagar says that to Miss Wellwood, I feel like it's that moment where the veil is lifted, and she can go one of two ways. She can be like, oh my God, I have messed up and I've been doing all of this stuff, and having that wake up moment, or being super angry, getting defensive, saying whatever and storming off. Yeah. And I think that's what happened. And same with Christianity. How many mission trips did we go on when we were in high school? How many mission trips did we go on when we were in college? And it's all in the name of, this is what we're supposed to do, and we're being helpful, and we're pushing our agenda because that's what we're supposed to do. But when we had that wake up call, we took a step back and we were like, why do I have to do this?
Yeah, I really like that parallel. I think we should jump into the witchy stuff now.
Yes.
Because there is the whole book is about witchcraft. We haven't really talked about that yet. The witchcraft part of this book starts when the girls, it's all four of them, so Rose, Zinnia, Fern, and Holly, they get to go to this bookmobile that comes to the house and delivers books. And they go in and they try to find books they want. And Fern is our really intelligent character. She like loves literature, and she's an artist,
theater kid.
So she's like, I need a book that I have never heard of before. And so she's very persistent about finding something that she wants to read, because this is her one chance to escape from the house into literature. So we meet this character named Miss Parse, who's the librarian, and she's like, oh, here, you should have this book. Fern is hesitant but ends up taking it, and it's this book called, what is it?
How to Be a Groovy Witch.
I think it's also important to note that Miss Parse gave Fern like 4 different books.
Oh yeah, and
she took it out, and Miss Deckel or Miss Wellwood is like, no, you can't have those. And it was books that it was
books that she they already read, but it had like
weird and they were
but
fine
it was
books.
Also kind of giving banned books.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Stupid.
And so then Miss Parse is like, you're different. Like, I want to help you. And she gives her this book, and Fern has to hide it under her clothes to get it inside.
Yeah, she has to hide the book. So Fern takes the book, and the girls all sit down and read it, because it's like, ooh, these groovy witches. Like, they start looking at it inside. It's like a grimoire. It says a very like simple spells to do this.
There's like beauty spells, charms, all things that
if you got a basic witch book, would have. Yes.
And then there's also a lot of stuff that they don't understand, different words, different tools, all of this stuff, and they're just like, what can we do with this?
We get to a point where our character Zinnia has really bad morning sickness, and everything makes her sick, and she's constantly throwing up. So the girls look into the book, and there's this spell called Turnaround, and they're like, we should do this spell, and they're all like, no, this is stupid. And they're like, no, let's just try it.
But they also do it to their doctor,
because the Dr. Vincent, who oh my gosh,
I don't like him.
not actually murder, but wow.
He's the worst.
He is the
Hate
worst.
that guy.
Oh my gosh. And
a
just
womanizer, someone who's like, you're a woman, you don't know what you're talking about, to a T, like that character.
Yes.
You want to punch in the face.
Yes.
Yes.
So the reason why they decide to curse him with the turnaround spell is because when Zinnia was going to him because she's so sick, he tells her, well, you don't actually, like, this is not a symptom of pregnancy. It's just in your head.
And it gets your blood boiling in the book. You're like, oh my gosh.
So of course they're like, let's give him this.
So
Yes,
they-
and as the reader, you're like, yes, justice.
Exactly.
Dr. Vincent. But the girls do the spell. It's really weird for them. It's an egg over her belly with all this very witchy. And the egg turns black.
That scene gives practical magic.
Yeah,
Yes.
like that scene when they're
It's
all
very,
together.
like, white. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they, Fern's actually the one getting checked out by the doctor while the girls are doing the spell. It's just fun, like on the dot when they're like time back and forth. And she watches Dr. Vincent all of a sudden become like violently ill. He's throwing up everywhere. He's throwing up on the nurse. And Fern is just sitting there like, yes, like this is awesome. Like you as the character are like,
yeah,
justice.
exactly.
And so you're watching this and this man has morning sickness, ladies, and he cannot handle it, that he goes to the hospital
For 2 weeks.
for 2 weeks because he's having morning sickness, which he looked at a 16-year-old girl and said, it's all in your head.
And
Don't
he-
be sick. You're
yeah.
making yourself throw up.
Yeah,
It is a
okay.
very justice moment
Yes.
through and through.
Yes, absolutely.
Just another wonderful example of how women are stronger than men.
Amen.
And
Taking
you know what?
our
And a
power
man
back.
wrote this.
Mhm.
Which
And
so
that's what
we like you, Grady.
Okay, Grady Hendrix, period. Like,
Yes,
okay.
yes, so good. So after the spell works and everything, Zinnia is like, whoa,
Yeah, pump the brakes.
holy Toledo. And then one night they're in bed and Fern wakes up and she sees a black dog in the room, and it's like a big scary
Scary.
black dog, and she is freaking out thinking, oh my gosh, this dog is about to eat me. And then Holly comes in and starts petting the dog and is being so cute with it, and they decide to follow the dog out of the house because the dog is trying to get them to leave. And
Wait, foreshadowing. That moment, foreshadowing.
yes,
Because she becomes the keeper of the line of Hecate
Oh, right. Yeah.
with the dogs. But
Oh,
Holly
because
was already...
Holly liked the dog.
Yeah.
Oh, that is cool.
I love that.
Purposeful? We
Well,
will never know. Unless Grady Hendrix, you comment below.
Comment below, Grady Hendrix.
please.
I hope you listen to what
Yeah,
we think
yeah.
of your book.
We love you.
Okay, so they follow the dog because
Yeah.
why wouldn't you follow a big scary black
And they
dog
can
outside?
also, this is like breaking a rule for them. They cannot
Yes.
leave the house at night. They cannot go into the woods because there's hippies in the woods and they're trying to kill you. Like literally they're telling the
Yes.
girls, like, don't go into the woods. There's psychos
Like the
and
man
murderers
said,
and they'll rip your skin off.
all of this stuff. What was I saying? Okay, so they leave the house. Oh, it's a huge turning point and breaking point because the girls, they are not allowed to leave the house at night. They're not allowed to leave the house, period. They can go out the side door. The only time they go in and out of the front door is when they get there, they come in, and when they go to the hospital, when they leave. Every other time, it is out the side door. So they sneak out the front door, which is a huge deal. And it's just, I don't know. I loved that moment because you're thinking, are they going to get caught? Are they going to get away with this?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So they're going outside. They follow this dog, and Rose is already out there. She's like, what the heck, guys? What took you so long?
Right. Which we love.
We love Rose. They go to the water. They're following this dog, and they find a river, which is, they're in Florida.
Yeah.
It is a bazillion
They're
degrees.
pregnant AF.
Oh my gosh. Also, okay, side note, all day, every day, the girls are cleaning. If you're singing that song, ladies, you are our people. If you know, you know.
Yes.
All day, every day, they're cleaning the house top to bottom. The only time they get a break is when they're 2 weeks before their due date, and then they
That's
are on
awful,
house arrest.
guys.
Right?
Like the last few months of my pregnancy, it was like, do not touch me. I will be on this couch forever.
Literally.
Hand me a burger.
I can
Leave me
corroborate
alone.
that. I was living
Now I
with
want a
Kay.
burger.
I was living with Kay and during her last pregnancy, and we went to Sonic a lot. I picked up lots of fudge, hot fudge. We should go to Sonic. Okay, anyways.
So once the girls sneak out and they follow this dog and they find this beautiful river, they're like, we're getting in. It's hot. It's summer. We're pregnant. And so they jump in and they begin to really blossom in this moment as characters. Like, this is the first point when they're not just names. They begin to open up, and they each reveal kind of the story of what happened to them. And so we get this really beautiful moment of like women connecting, and they're naked in the water, pregnant, like on their backs, their stomachs probably are popping out. And it's this moment where it's just night. We're in this water. No one can really see us. Let's open up.
Yeah. And I think it's beautiful because for them, it's the first time that they've seen other pregnant women naked.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure they're not looking in the mirror all the time because there's probably not a lot of mirrors in the house.
They hate it.
And I just thought that was a beautiful moment.
Yeah. And so the girls begin to open up and each of them tell their story. But this moment happens where Holly, who hasn't spoken the whole book, begins to speak. And she begins to tell her story. It's this beautiful moment because she's basically why she chose to be quiet is because she told her story to many, many people and nobody believed her. And so she was like, fine, if you're not going to believe me, I'm not going to talk anymore. Her parents didn't believe her. The people at the house think she's crazy, telling people not to listen to her. And so this moment when she opens up and she begins to speak, she's like, I'm going to try one more time and maybe they'll listen to my story because I feel this connection in this water. And I've seen other girls tell their stories, so maybe they'll believe me.
Yeah. And
then I think that's a great victim story, like when you're with a lot of people who've been victimized. And so she tells the story that her reverend, this man of God who everybody loves, has been sexually assaulting her since she was 8 years old. And
she got noticed because she sang really pretty in the choir.
So she is pregnant because this man, I was going to say many words, but I can't say them on the podcast. This man that we dislike with our whole hearts and whole souls gets this girl pregnant, and they blame it on a choir boy. And when she tries to tell people finally that she's being molested, no one believes her. And so she tells the girls this, and they all turn around and immediately are like, we have to make sure Holly doesn't go home to this guy.
And
like immediately. I love that.
Yes. And most heartbreaking thing for Holly too is when she tells adults, her mom, she gets her mouth washed out with soap. Yeah. When she tells her dad, she gets beat. And the wife, Reverend Jerry's wife, was helping and grooming her and helping her husband sleep with her.
Yeah.
So this whole moment is happening for the girls, and it's so heart touching because you get to see that there's that camaraderie, that the coven that they're gonna start and have,
literally,
it's beginning, and you just feel that connection between them. Then Miss Parcay shows up.
So when we see this moment happening between these four people and how they're just truly being themselves, we look over and there's a being that's standing just right at the river watching them, and they figure out that it's actually the librarian, the person that gave them the book How to Be a Groovy Witch, is there
with her two dogs,
with her two black dogs. And they all rush out, get out of the water, and they put their clothes on. Miss Parcay has been listening to this conversation, so and I think in a sense kind of knows what they want. But she does this thing where she says, I can give you all of these things, all the things that you're talking about, the protection for Holly, all of the above. And there's this whole moment where they decide to essentially follow her. She says specifically, like, you have to pledge yourself to me. Mm-hmm. And they do this whole ritual. They become a coven, and they have now essentially pled to following Hecate, the line of Hecate. So we learn, yes, that Miss Parcay is carrying the line of Hecate. We go and we meet her coven at one point, and there's another woman there who carries the line of Sybil. And she says these are 6,000 lives, and for Hecate it's like 2,000 lives. It's a huge deal.
so that it's passed down to, like, they pass down the magic to every woman. So it's like this beautiful long line of power of witches from the past. And so it's this really strong magic that when you accept it, it's this beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Right? When you accept it, you're like, I am part of this.
If you're willing.
If you're willing. But if you're not willing, we meet one more lady in the coven. She was not willing to take the line, but there was no other choice. So it was forced upon her. And she has, like, lost her ever loving mind. She's naked in a diaper, like, just like sputtering to herself. Kind of like the stereotypical witch that you think the scary witches.
Yep.
She's like psycho. The old crone.
Yeah. When you see, you're an old crone.
Like
you're
when
psycho.
you think when Snow White, that scary ass witch, that's what we got. Naked in a diaper.
And she's there, and they're like, well, yeah, she didn't accept it, but that's what happens when you don't. And you're like, this is kind of like, you're walking to this coven and you're hearing these things. You're like, do we like these witches? Right? You're like, this is the first time you're like, is Miss Parsley bad?
What's going on?
Like, this is because you don't feel that way at first. You're like, she's kind of weird, but she's.
Besides the whole, you have to pledge yourself to me if you want to leave this world behind.
That's the first moment.
That's when it rubs you a little bit. But then the coven, you're like, okay,
whoa,
this is a little bit.
Whoa.
That lady's crazy.
I thought this was all fun and games, guys.
Which I think it's funny because we're witches.
Yeah.
And when we first meet her, we're like, oh my God, finally
someone. A witch.
Yes.
Like, she's going to help them. She's going to empower them.
Right.
This is awesome. And then we find out she's trying to control them.
Yeah. It's like one of that 1-2 punch with, you're like, Miss Wellwood, you're like, is the bad person. So you're like, oh, here comes Miss Parsley. She's going to save the girls. And then when she's bad, you're like, who's going to help them?
How is this going to turn out?
Because these girls are in desperate need of help. We need to get Holly away from Reverend. Like, that is your, like, the rest of the book. You're like, this needs to happen.
Right.
You as the audience are like, no. You need to figure this out.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. And so when she's not there to help him, she's not that savior. It's heart-wrenching.
It is. So then
I didn't realize that until right now.
Yeah. We come along, and of course they're super pregnant and just getting more pregnant as time goes on, because that's how it works. You're welcome for that anatomy lesson. And it's time for Rose to have her baby. So I love this because it's truly horrific and horrifying and terrible. So Rose, it's a Friday. On Saturday or Sunday, there's going to be this huge holiday.
It's 4th of July, I think.
It's 4th of July. So everything's shut down. Everyone's taking their time off. So Nurse Kent comes in and she tells Rose, it's time. We're taking you to the hospital. And Rose is like, no, my due date isn't until Monday. She's not ready.
Yeah, Blossom's not ready.
Which is also important to note. Rose is the only character from the beginning, from the very beginning, that says she wants to keep her baby.
Yeah, and named the baby.
And has named the baby. Blossom. And has dreamed about what she wants her life to look like with the baby. All of this. So Nurse Kent comes in and is saying, we're taking you early. She says no. She is being fiery about it. She says, you can't make me. They bring Dr. Vincent in. He's trying to convince her and is so condescending.
Oh my gosh.
And he's like, you don't understand this choice. Like, this is what's best for you. Rose calls him out and she's like, no, the reason you want me to go in is to make your doctor buddy's life easier so you guys can go have fun at the 4th of July party. Yeah. And that's what it is.
It's going to induce you.
Yes, exactly. And then Diane comes in, which we haven't talked about Diane. She is the social worker, and she comes across as another one of those, oh, you might save them. You're a girl's
person.
Girl.
Yeah.
And she's a little bit younger. She's a little more hip. But then you hear the underlying manipulation that's there. And this is not who we thought it was. Yeah. So Diane comes in. She's trying to convince Rose. And then we see that facade of being the cool girl's girl crack. And Diane grabs Rose. There starts to be a tussle and everything. And then Rose's water breaks. And she starts freaking out. And it's because of this tussle that is all happening fast.
The one thing about the writing in this scene, which I want to call out to for Grady Hendrix, is you can just have this moment where she gets taken and then she goes. And that's the scene. But it's broken up in between them playing spades. It's this like Rose, you need to come. And she's like, and then you see Fern like, okay, if I keep playing spades, okay, I'm going to play the 7. And so it's like broken up in these moments between this game of spades they're playing to like them basically forcing Rose to get out of the room. In amidst that game, I just think it's a really
well built scene.
It was. Yeah. It was really good.
The choice of how he wrote it was really cool.
Absolutely. So Rose goes to the hospital, has her baby, comes back, and all of the girls, Fern specifically, is like, where is she? Where's Blossom? And Rose breaks the news of, I gave her away. And Fern, first reaction is anger. What? Why would you do that? How could you do that? All of this. And you can feel that they broke Rose's spirit.
Yeah.
Which is, as the reader, is so heartbreaking because she's the one character that they haven't been able to break yet. Mm-hmm. Rose explains the story. She has her baby. She's holding her daughter. And she tells them that she still wants to keep Blossom. And Diane comes in and is like, okay, well, if you want to keep her, we're going to put you in the psych ward because you're an unfit mother. No one thinks that you can take care of this baby. And if you think that you are, we're going to put you in the psych ward until you decide not to.
Yeah.
And Rose lasts one night.
Yeah.
And has a roommate in there with her. And it is so horrifying for her. And she says, I can't do this. So she was forced to give away Blossom. But when she's telling Fern the story, she says, no, I wasn't forced to. I told them to take her.
Yeah, I broke.
I told them to take her.
For that's the shift of the book where Rose just kind of goes more to the dark magic and it's like, I want them to pay.
Yes. And so
it's that switch that's like, I don't care anymore. I just want them to suffer like me.
Exactly.
And that's when the dark magic happens.
Where we get into blood magic and it's a price.
Yeah. So it's everything is like your blood magic is if you use it, then there will be a price to pay. And for it, it's normally a pain, a great pain. So Rose does a spell to get back at Miss Wellwood. And she has to pull off all of her fingernails in order to pay this price. And so this is when the horror comes in and it like
she pries a butter knife under her nails.
Yeah, like it's nasty and you're listening to this and you're like, ugh.
But also I'm like, Grady Hendrix, you went there. I love it.
Exactly.
And so that's what happens, and the consequence is Miss Wellwood gets pregnant immediately, has to leave, and like within a week gives birth to eels. And Hagar and her sister Miriam like deliver these, and it's a scene only in Hagar and Miss Wellwood's perspective. It's like totally separate from the girls, and it's this really gruesome, icky. Another scene that you're like, you went there, you gave birth to eels, like, whoa, you psycho. And we love you.
That's when Hagar is like, nah, someone's messing with witchcraft, and she knows who it is.
And she's like, Fern, and I think because Rose is gone by this point, she's like, Holly, Zinnia, Fern, get your asses down here. We are not doing this. And so they get caught because they're also trying to do blood magic with Holly to prove herself to Miss Parcay.
Yes, because so we talked about the lines, the witch lines like Hecate and Sybil, and Miss Parcay has picked Fern to be the next in her line.
Yeah.
And Fern does not want to do it, but it would be a great opportunity for Holly to get away from her abuser and everything. So she's trying to let Holly take her place. And Miss Parcay says, you have to do the spell. You have to prove yourself. And so they set up the spell. They're trying to make it rain, a huge storm, and they're doing it. And you can feel the desperation in Fern while the spell is going on. She just has to,
Holly just has to do it.
Holly has to do it. And you feel that desperation, and you can feel like the crackle in the air of just the, it's just, it's there, and you're waiting in anticipation. Yes.
And she says, Holly, you have to cut off your tongue. So Holly tries to do it, and she just can't.
And you feel the storm dissipate.
Yeah. And it's like, and then Hagar walks in, and it's like, nah. She bottles up the storm. She buries it. She does all this really cool witchy
buries
stuff.
Silver. Yeah.
It's like she's not a witch, but she is witchy. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and that's, she says I've been around. I know this. I know how to protect myself, but I don't practice it.
Yeah.
And they do salt on all of the doorways.
Yeah, they start doing protection spells. The girls carry salt packets. This is like the first time you're like, it was really relatable.
Yeah.
Like protection spells and the salt and all that stuff. It was like this magic we know instead of like taking your fingernails off and
actual blood magic.
Yeah. And so this was like a fun scene, and it protects the girls throughout the rest of the novel.
And it's funny because when Hagar is pouring the salt, Fern is like, she's just gonna walk over it.
Yeah, she's like, this is not gonna work.
Which it's so funny. But then they get to see it actually work. And then Miss Wellwood has been gone because she had that very traumatic experience. Yeah. But she comes back and she immediately notices her silver is gone. And she sees some of the salt or whatever.
It's just, we don't do that stuff here.
Yes.
Right?
And makes them clean the silver, puts it away. It's another moment where you're like, oh my God, they had this one thing that was going to help them. But now they don't have control.
It switches, because Miss Parcey literally switches 180 and says, no, Fern, you have to choose the line or I will force it upon you. Yes. And Fern's like, no, I don't want this. And she's like, then she becomes the bad guy at this point, because she's like, I don't care. Yeah. You don't have a choice, which is another ripping a choice away from a woman. You will choose this path. And it's a path that's weird because you're like, but it's a powerful woman path. Like, Fern, why aren't you choosing this? But Fern's like, no.
Which
I don't want this. And Miss Parcey's like, too bad.
And it makes sense because the only life that Fern knows is in this world. She's in a cage. She's a bird in a cage. Yeah. She doesn't understand that if she were to take this line, she could be out of the cage and have so much more freedom.
She's like, I just want to go back to my life. I just want to go to college. I just want to have a family. She's like, that's her dream. And so she says no, and Miss Parcey becomes the bad guy and says, well, it doesn't matter. So then the girls are trying to protect themselves from Miss Parcey with the magic. In the end, Fern breaks after her birth story. She gets put in. The scene is beautiful. You should read it, about her experience in the hospital. So she breaks.
Beautifully horrifying.
Yeah, it's horrifying, but it's like really well done.
Yeah.
So she breaks because they take away her son, and she goes back to the house and she's like, I'm done. I've been broken now, just like Rose has been broken. I don't care about this anymore. And Zinnia's like, please help me. I need help with Holly. Holly has done a 180 and she's like up in the attic giving birth, and like no one knows. And so Fern's like, we're gonna take her to the hospital. My experience is what she'll have. It'll be fine.
And Holly's breaking point is because Reverend Jerry comes to the house to check in because he's going to adopt Holly's baby, because he's going to be the good Christian man and adopt Holly's baby. She comes down and she has to see him and see her attacker. And that's the way that she's taking back control, is by going up in the attic and having the baby. And that's when Fern and Zinnia get there. They have to go to the hospital. Zinnia does her crazy being able to talk out of any situation, gets the taxi driver to take her to Hagar's, and Hagar and her sister deliver Holly's baby.
And that's also another beautiful scene that you need to go read, because it's like, it's beautiful about natural birth and trusting the process and trusting the women around you in the community. It's a very like powerful moment for people who love natural birth.
Yeah. And the whole reason that they go to Hagar and Miriam's house is because, aside from working at the Wellwood house, they're actually doulas. This is a huge cultural moment just to highlight Black doulas, especially in America, because they were the only ones that were doing it after hospital births started. And so this makes total sense for them to have all this information and be in this community.
Yeah, that power that they represented.
And everyone knows where they are because everyone in the Black community was having babies. So they take them straight to Hagar and Miriam's house. And man, it's a really cool moment just to see how powerful home birth actually is, and also to remember that we'd been doing it for thousands and thousands of years before that. So
absolutely. And this is also the point in the book where I was hopeful. I'm like, okay, they're gonna get her out. They're gonna get her out.
Holly had her baby. They're gonna get her. They're gonna sneak her away. No one knows we're here. We're safe.
This is perfect. And
they were not.
Bum bum bum.
They were found immediately. Hagar gets in trouble.
They go back
separated,
to the house.
And Reverend Jerry's there waiting for his baby. It holds the baby, and you're like, it's Holly's baby. It's not your baby.
Remember when he said some of his hand being a little too close to the down its back?
And it's this disgusting moment. And that's when Fern goes up, bites her tongue off in front of the officers to call back the storm that Holly created. And at first nothing's happening. And then the storm hits.
Holy hell is unleashed.
Yeah, the house is ripped to pieces. And this is the point when they're like talking about how all of the Wellwood stuff is being ripped down, all of his portraits, the house is breaking, and it's a really cool scene. And no, Reverend doesn't die. He almost dies. She chooses not to kill him.
Yeah.
How this all ends is Miss Parsley and her witches come finally, and they find Fern, and they capture the storm, and they close it down. And they're like, Fern, you are coming with us right now. You have no choice. And as she's getting like sucked into this line with all these witches chanting, Holly's like, no. And Mags, the other lady who was forced upon it, says, I can't do this either.
She says, don't do it again.
Don't do it again. Let's choose Holly and leave Fern alone. And the coven votes, and they vote yes to choose to Holly. And so Fern is released.
And it's beautiful because they're saying one line is not, like, the 6,000 lives or 2,000 that we'd be losing is not worth one person's life, which was so beautiful.
Right. So we know from Mags, like, this is not worth it. And so it shows that power of a coven, because even though one person might be lost, like Miss Parsley was, the rest of them come together and they're like, we're not going to do this again. You are wrong.
And so we get that hope back that we did get Holly away, and we saved her baby.
We did save Holly and her baby
from Reverend Jerry.
And Reverend Jerry almost dies, but then he doesn't, because Fern's like, I'm not going to choose this. That was a cool moment.
Yeah. So then, like, that's like the biggest. That's not how the book ends, but then Fern's dad comes and picks her up, and they go home, and there's that moment in the car ride when her dad is nervous talking. He is feeling the silence, and you can tell, and Fern also knows that he feels guilty and is trying to make sure that they're okay. And
also communicating to her, like, hey, by the way, everything's going back to normal, so you need to forget this.
Exactly.
Right? Like, I just picked you up from camp. How was camp? Was it good? Okay, we're going home now. And it was that moment that it was like telling Fern, like, you need to make everything go back to normal.
Exactly.
It was kind of
yeah. So then she goes back and everything's back to normal. Yeah. And you're like, okay. And then we get
a lovely little epilogue.
Yes.
50 years later.
Yep.
So they're all like in their 50, or it was like all in their 60s or 70s at this point. And we've learned that Fern became a doula, like we've said, and she meets up with the other girls when they're older, and they all kind of reconnect as this coven, as old ladies. Like, they never knew each other between, but as teenagers and as old ladies, they connected again. Yeah, it was very fun.
Yeah, and the reason is because this is the first time that she's had any contact from her baby, her childhood, her baby she called Charlie Brown. And because of that, she's going to her coven and asking for life advice. Yeah. Like, she's asking,
the first time she actually needs them. She's like, I need them. And so they all get together.
Well, because they're the only ones who understand. Because her sister doesn't, no one knows. Yeah. Still to that day. And Fern gets to the house, and they're at Rose's house. Someone answers the door, and she's like, that is a really young Rose. And then she sees the next oldest Rose, and then she finally sees her Rose, and it was just a beautiful moment.
And we realize it's her and Blossom. She like got her Blossom back, and now she's with Blossom's daughter. This beautiful like line of power. Yeah. And it was just, and Blossom like immediately loved Rose. Yeah. You know, like, I love that. Like, you know, the other like who was it? Zinnia was like, I don't want anything to do with you. And at this point, Fern doesn't even know if Charlie Brown wants to talk to her or not. And so you get this, you know, they might choose to not want to talk to you, and they might accept you right away. That very polarizing, right? And so she's in the middle. Like, I don't know how she's going to react, but she ends up getting the courage to call. And she's like, I always wanted you. I never gave you up. I never gave you up. And it's like, that's where the book ends. And it's like beautiful, because it's like, she finally got her peace. Yep. Even if it was 50 years later. Yeah. With the importance of healing. Like, you need to, even when you're old, like,
absolutely.
It's beautiful, like, ending to that book. So
it was such a powerful story of taking back your power, owning your story, and it's also a horror novel. So there was really a lot of twists and turns for us as the reader to go through this journey of having no power at all, being able to get that power and live with the consequences and actions of what you guys did.
And we're going to end our podcast with a quote from the How to Be a Groovy Witch. It's in the middle of the novel, and I think it gives a great ending to go off what Lou said about just sisterhood and what a coven means, and what the girls found in the end, as even though through all this darkness, they did truly find a beautiful friendship and coven within themselves. Whether she knows it or not, every witch belongs to a powerful night flying army, the ones who came before her and the ones practicing our craft today. When you are at the lowest, when you feel your least powerful, know that this dark legion is there for you. Witches will catch you when you fall, carry you when you're tired, heal you when you are broken. This is the first truth of our craft. A real witch is never alone.
And if you are looking forward to our weekly tarot read, we'll have all of the tarot pulls in the bottom description.
Thanks so much for listening, guys. We love this book and we hope you enjoy it. We're going to close out our circle. We thank air, fire, water, and earth.
The light in me sees the light in you. Love you, witches.
Bye, witchlings.
Second
And
dinner.
they
Yes.
get skyclad, which I love.
Yeah, we want to say that.
Second dinner.
I have to have first dinner.